Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I thought that, being it's been a while since we've had one, that we sit down and have a regular old discussion video about some recent statements made by Alex Hutchinson, the director of Google Stadia, in relation to streamers and their use of video game content, how this relates to discussions that have been had within the gaming world about this subject all the way back in 2014, and have an open and frank talk about the merits or lack of merit such statements might have, along with a brief talk about the legal aspect of such things and how some games companies might go the legal route at some time in the future. So yeah, a lot of stuff to go over there, but before I do though, please take the time to watch the spot from our weekly sponsor because YouTube continues to get even worse for the content creators by the day. One need only see the recent shadow banning of PewDiePie for an example of that. Yes, that's right, I have a weekly sponsor because YouTube is YouTube, and because everyone, including the sponsor, enjoyed my little jab at Raid Shadow Legends, we'll continue that in an ongoing tradition by introducing you to the poorly photoshopped by me, Ridge Shadow Wallet. Ridge Shadow Wallet is light, sleek, and industrial. The little guy does fit easily in your front pocket, and as many people were asking, I can myself attest to these guys being RFID blocking. A Ridge Shadow Wallet provided me with my own, and I chose the carbon fiber pattern wallet because uniform branding is a thing. There are over 30 colors and styles to choose from, as well as phone cases, a Ridge Shadow knife, and even Ridge Shadow bags. The Ridge Shadow Wallet comes with a lifetime warranty, and the team is so confident in their Shadow Wallets that they will let you test drive it for 45 days. If you don't like it, simply send it back for a full refund. Get 10% off today with free worldwide shipping and returns by going to ridge.com/SidAlpha and use the code SidAlpha. Link is in the description below. Disclaimer: Ridge Shadow Wallet not to be confused with any terrible mobile games. Now, Alex Hutchinson is, as I said, the creative director for Google Stadia, a cloud gaming system that creates a self-contained gaming ecosystem that PC gamers have long derided consoles over for an absolute eternity. And that is the concept of a completely closed ecosystem, where games distribution is locked to the provider of the gaming hardware, and along with it, the concept of paid platform exclusivity, which is also a concept that Epic Games had brought to PC in an attempt to use their wallets to create competition with Steam. With Google Stadia, you have a free or paid version, and any games purchased are completely locked to the Stadia platform, which means if Stadia ever closes down, you lose any and all games you've purchased. But while I did feel bringing up Alex's ties to the games industry and the platform that he is the director of, it really isn't entirely pertinent to the discussion at hand, and I do want to avoid myself directly poisoning the well, as it were. So let's lay that aside and focus just on the statements at hand and the discussion that can be had over them. Now, at first glance, it seems extremely cut and dry in terms of what Alex Hutchinson has been saying. However, there are two distinct components to his statements. One is essentially the piracy argument, which I'll discuss in a few moments. The other is in terms of licensed content usage versus unlicensed content usage. What Alex Hutchinson initially wrote on Twitter was, streamers worried about getting their content pulled because they used music they didn't pay for should be more worried by the fact that they're streaming games they didn't pay for as well. It's all gone as soon as publishers decide to enforce it. The real truth is the streamers should be paying the developers and publishers of the games they stream. They should be buying a license like any real business and paying for the content they use. Which, while many are latching on to the first argument, the piracy argument, they're utterly ignoring the legal argument. But for the sake of context and the sake of clarity, I feel that both are important to discuss. Now, Alex later continued with, most of the time playing the game just helps the streamer. People tune in to watch their show, which is built on content they didn't pay for. If their show requires game content, then a percentage of their revenue should go to the game they used. Amazing to me that people are upset at someone saying that the creators of content should be allowed to make some of the money from other people using their content for profit. And additionally, they're not promoting the game, they're running a business. It may also sometimes promote the game, but that's not their business. And it is this sentiment that brings the piracy argument into focus, or at least what I'm referring to as the piracy argument. And also, while Alex is amazed by the negative reaction he's seen, it comes as no surprise to most of the rest of us. And for me, it's because a lot of these arguments have already been had. Now, back in 2014, Phil Fish, the developer for Fez, stated on later deleted Twitter posts the following per GameSpot. YouTubers should have to pay out a huge portion of their revenue to the developers from which they steal all their content. Ad revenue should be shared with developers. This should be built into YouTube. Anything else is basically piracy. Along with some follow-up tweets such as, if you generate money from putting my content on your channel, you owe me money. Simple as that. If you buy a movie, are you then allowed to stream the entirety of it publicly for people to watch for free? No, because that's illegal. Systems are in place to prevent that. But buy Fez, put all of it on YouTube, turn on ads, make money from it, and that's totally fine. And the developer should in no way be compensated for their work being freely distributed to the world. Right, makes sense. And in my mind, there's no need to really unpack and dissect Phil Fish's arguments, especially considering they're 6 years of age and those discussions had already been had and finished well before I had even started my own YouTube channel. So let's focus on Alex's comments, and to do that, we should first analyze the role of content creators as the ecosystem itself has undergone a slow but inexorable shift over the years. The currently accepted forms of games content creators follows along some pretty standard formats. First is the critics and critique channels. Now, I fervently hope that Alex's statement here in no way imply anything regarding those, because if it did, then he would be entering some very dangerous waters in terms of fair use and of journalistic rights under the First Amendment. But as he repeatedly stated streamers, I will take it as at least an implication that he did not mean critiques to be included. Next is commentary and no commentary YouTube channels. Now, in terms of commentary channels, where there's gameplay with a single YouTuber or a small group of YouTubers holding discussions and the like, they aren't too dissimilar from a stream in terms of overall style of content, with the exception that there's no real audience interaction taking place. And so channels such as these, I feel, would fall under the umbrella of Alex's statements. However, there is one thing I will say in terms of no commentary channels. You lot had best be careful, because simply showing a lengthy stretch of nothing but gameplay and nothing else can land you in hot water, as that content is not in any way fair use. And while it has nothing to do with this discussion, there is one aspect that even no commentary games channels on YouTube can provide, is to call attention to the game being played and might help contribute to the game in some small way. Then we have Let's Players and streamers. Now, I lump these together because they're extremely similar in form and style. However, streamers do have the added benefit of audience interaction. And yes, commentary YouTube channels come very close to Let's Plays in general concept. Now, streaming, as a form of content, focuses very heavily on the creator themselves, their reactions and feedback to the game they are playing, and their reactions and discussions with their community within a live format setting. And the methods behind this are extremely varied and highly unique to each individual streamer. Take Dr. Disrespect, for example, who elevates presentation of his stream in terms of production quality nearly to a form of art unto itself. Or others, such as my friend Rachel Messer, who relies on her irreverent wit and candor, along with subjecting herself to games that easily terrify her, in order to entertain and engage with her audience. And still others, like Dr. Disrespect and numerous other streamers, that engage in competitive games at an extremely high level of competence. Pro gamers often use streaming as well, as there is an audience for that high level of competitive play. And Alex feels that these creators should give money to games developers and publishers due to their use of video games. As many people had commented on Alex's post, and was also said by Phil Fish in 2014, they equate this to a streamer showing a movie or an episode of television and profiting off of it, which first off would be illegal. And as a reminder to all of you streamers out there, if you throw up a YouTube video of someone else's content while you go off for a piss or to get food, that is also illegal, by the way, and you should stop doing it. And secondly, that argument made about movies and the like are not accurate in the slightest. Now, let's not forget that video games differ from most other forms of entertainment in one very significant respect. It is, by its very nature, transformative. Now, for all of you armchair lawyers out there, yes, I'm well aware that video game live streams are derivative works and as such don't constitute fair use, but I would ask you to pull your digits away from your keyboards for a moment, because I am not speaking in terms of copyright here. The term transformative can be used in other places outside of the legal realm, after all. Now, in a non-legal sense, video games are by their very nature transformative creative works. With every shift of the screen, every movement of the mouse, every click of the mouse button or press of the controller, every dialogue option chosen, every press of a keyboard key shifts the content in subtle or dramatic ways that make the gameplay wholly unique to the individual player. That is a very stark contrast to non-interactive forms of media such as a movie, where it is static. There are no options within a standard movie, and because of that, everyone will experience the same form of content. That is not the case with video games. The moment you introduce interactivity, you allow for that transformative aspect, again in a non-legal sense. That singularly unique gameplay differentiates you from every other player of the game. Both on a technical and on a conceptual level, video games and movies are completely and utterly different. Of course, there are differences in terms of video games as well. With a multiplayer title that has little to no narrative elements to the story, the narrative is made up by the streamer and those they are playing with. With games such as Fortnite, Among Us, and other multiplayer games, the actors are the players. This isn't the case with more narrative-focused games who may have voice actors, mocap artists, and heavily scripted elements that are non-interactive in nature and essentially unalterable. And in those scenarios, Alyx might have a bit of a case, as it's not the player driving the content. It's not the players interacting with it. With scripted elements such as that, outside of dialogue options, the game then takes on the same aspects and non-interactive elements as a movie or television show. But to my mind, video games are an interactive medium, and I feel that the narrative elements should also reflect this. Oh, cutscenes are beautiful and all that and can be a very powerful tool, but I play a video game for its interactivity. If I wanted to watch a movie, I would watch a movie. Of course, there are also some types of games, of which there aren't very many, that Alyx would have a strong case for in that regard, and that would be games like QTE games. The Telltale game series would be a good example of that, as even though there are dialogue options, there are no real branching story arcs as a result, and the vast majority of the content is static and non-interactive in nature. But this argument that Alyx is making is similar to what Phil Fish had said in 2014 in a conceptual fashion. That streamers are riding the coattails or in concept stealing video game content, which trails us back to why I referred to it as a piracy argument. There was also his statement, they're not promoting the game. They're running a business and may also sometimes promote the game, but that's not their business. And as an overall, this is not an accurate statement to make. True, a lot of streamers do not actively promote the game they are playing, but that doesn't mean there isn't at least an implied promotion. Now, some might ask, well, isn't that the same concept as pain and exposure? Well, no, not in the slightest. Pain and exposure is where someone seeks a creator out, say for example, an artist, and wishes for them to create something just for them and no one else. And instead of paying them for their work, they offer promotion. It's a terrible deal and no artist should ever agree to such a thing, but with video games, it is most certainly not paying for exposure simply to have a streamer purchase your game in order to play it on their channel. Because money did change hands there. Now, that doesn't at all give the creator a legal right to stream their gameplay, but let's leave the legal stuff alone for a bit. And in terms of paying for exposure, in essence, this is what happens though when game developers distribute review copies, both to critics and to streamers. For critics, in the hopes of them creating a review for their game, in essence, hoping that review would help generate sales. Much the same with game developers providing review code for streamers, as such a thing does have a similar effect. Now, this circles around to the idea that streamers do or do not drive sales of video games, and while the individual effect could be argued either way, there is no denying the cumulative effect that streamers and other content creators can have on driving sales. We need only again look at Among Us as an example of that. Among Us is a mechanically very simple yet ridiculously fun game that combines fun gameplay with a heavy reliance on interactivity and discussion with other players to help form the overall gameplay experience. It's not unlike the concept of the board game Secret Hitler in that regard, and it works beautifully well. That game was released all the way back in November of 2018, and it didn't garner that much of a following. That is, until streamers got a hold of it and helped popularize it. And we can see this by looking at the monthly statistics from the Steam data, where in June of this year, it started picking up and it started growing hard in August and absolutely exploded in September. And all of this is because streamers saw other streamers playing it, loved the concept, and begun streaming it themselves. And then viewers went and bought the game and started playing it, telling their friends about it, and as such, the game has become exceptionally well received. So to assume that streamers do not result in increased revenue for video games is narrow-minded at best. And when Apex Legends was released, they initially launched it by paying ridiculous sums of money for top streamers to play it, and it was an exceptionally successful marketing campaign that was the primary reason for the success of that game. The same thing with Epic Games and Fortnite, where streamers were perhaps the largest single contributing factor to that game earning billions of dollars for Epic Games. But this doesn't only happen at a macro level, this also happens at a micro level. To a lesser or greater extent, streamers and content creators playing your game result in sales of those games, as long as it's a good game. If the game is good, creators making content will help to drive sales. If the game is bad, creators making content will not drive sales. And frankly, if the game is bad, it won't be streamed for very long, and there won't be as much content being made about it on YouTube either. The only exception to this is if the game is so epically bad that it actually creates an ecosystem based on mockery of the game, where deriding the game becomes its own source of entertainment. It's still possible to drive sales, but I would definitely feel for any game developer that finds themselves in that sort of position. And this is why I don't ascribe to the piracy argument, the argument of, oh, look at all these people making money off of the back of someone else's work. And people that say that fail to recognize or fail to understand that this can be and is a very symbiotic relationship between game developers and streamers or content creators. This symbiotic relationship is also why some games work to design Twitch plugins that interact with the games in order to more take advantage of this promotional potential. In terms of marketing, watching a stream or a Let's Play will be far more beneficial to game developers and publishers because it's not perceived to the audience as an advertisement. They get to see the gameplay along with someone in a perceived level of authority or trust promoting the game through their content. Traditional commercials are like a bicycle with a bent wheel compared to the sports car that is YouTube and Twitch content in terms of marketing power. The smart game developers and publishers take advantage of this. And then there's Alex Hutchinson. And YouTube and Twitch content is beneficial to the consumer as well, simply because of that very real aspect that they're able to obtain actual gameplay and feedback of the creators playing it, which helps make an informed purchasing decision as long as that coverage and content is done fairly and doesn't contain within it misinformation. This makes the viewer more informed than they were before, and an informed consumer is something that we should strive for. And if you have faith in your game, if you believe it is of a high quality and good value, then those are precisely the type of consumer you should be striving to sell your game to. Those are your bread and butter market. And if you do not want an informed consumer, then quite likely your business practices are unethical and anti-consumer in nature, although I feel there will be more than one comment being made that Alex works for Stadia, so of course. But I'll be honest, I don't know the guy, so I won't rake him over the coals over an assumption of intent, and I hope that I've at least provided some context as to why I don't at all agree with Alex's arguments here. However, there is still the legal aspect to discuss, which is a very different beast altogether. The legality argument surrounding this is actually quite clear, and it first came to my attention when Campos Santos, the developers for the game Firewatch, threatened to DMCA strike PewDiePie if he didn't take down his videos of the game after a controversy, and this ties into the whole concept of a license for gameplay. Now, Let's Plays and live streams of video games are actually not fair use under the vast majority of circumstances. They are, in fact, derivative works. Yes, they are transformative, but they do not at all fit the four factors of fair use except under rare instances. And derivative works are copyright infringement unless a license for that copyright is obtained. Now, this license can take a couple of different forms. The first is an expressed or an implied license. This is where blanket or direct permission is granted for the use of the material. Providing a review code to a streamer for your game would be an example of an expressed license. Then we have an implied license, such as a blanket statement by the copyright holder that anyone may make use of their content. It is worth noting, however, that both an expressed and an implied license can be revoked at any time for any reason, or no reason at all, by the copyright holder, and when they do so, any content you had created before that revocation becomes copyright infringement. An example of an implied license can actually be found on the Firewatch game's website. Now previously, before the whole dust-up with PewDiePie, the site read, "Can I stream this game? Can I make money off of those streams?" Yes, we love that people stream and share their experiences in the game. You are free to monetize your videos as well. It doesn't hurt to let us know on Twitter when you're live, we might show up in your chat. And since then, they have modified their implied license to read, "Can I stream this game? Can I make money off of those streams?" Yes, we love that people stream and share their experiences in the game, and we extend the privilege of streaming and monetizing our games on Twitch, YouTube, Steam, and elsewhere to our customers. Streaming and Let's Plays are implicit but revocable privileges, and if you happen to be among the very few players who use your platform to spread hate or harassment, we would prefer that you not use our game in your content. Now, there is one way to get by with a license that can't be so easily revoked at the drop of the hat, and that is essentially by going along with what Alex was saying. Because a license agreement, which usually involves money changing hands, is a binding contract which cannot be revoked at the whim of the copyright holder. It would require the creator to violate the terms of the contract, and likely a breach of contract lawsuit would follow, in which Alex feels that creators should pay developers and publishers to obtain a license to utilize their content, while many, if not most of those game developers and publishers already benefit from that symbiotic relationship. And the streamers don't need to purchase a license as long as there is an express or implied license already present, because the number of times that a developer or publisher would go so far as to revoke those will be very few and far between. because doing so carries along with it the risk of extreme negative PR and backlash. But frankly, it would be bad business for the developers to require a license agreement, especially as many, if not most, game developers and publishers out there know full well the benefits that are gained from the visibility that streamers and content creators can provide. This is why review codes are offered to critics and also to streamers and Let's Players. This is why larger game companies sign streaming deals with larger creators to play their game at or even prior to launch, because it drives sales, because it is beneficial. Not just to the streamer, but to the viewers and to the developer as well. So yeah, there you have it. Let me know your thoughts about any of this, and for God's sake, subscribe and share the videos. YouTube hates me enough as it is. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time.